The next show will start in 1 minute.
Everyone is expected to be the same. Everyone's expected to not talk about these things openly. In the orientation at Facebook, they said the #1 rule of Facebook is don't talk about Facebook. I see an odd note on an account. Being a curious person, I decided to look into it.
Things will only change if we, the people, are brave enough to step forward and do something bold. People throughout history started blowing the whistle, and they changed things forever. Were they unreasonable? Yeah. But all progress depends upon the unreasonable man. They may be able to stop one man, but they can't stop all of us. Your courage will be contagious, and it will awaken a sleeping giant. Be a catalyst for change. Wear a camera. Be brave. Do something.
Google and Facebook, they don't sell you anything. They sell you.
These are all free services, but obviously they're not. Your interaction with them is governed so that it will generate revenue.
You give Google a lot of information. You're searching for the most private stuff on Google, things that your wife might or your spouse might not want you to know about.
Facebook constantly manipulates their users. They do it by the things that they insert into the news feeds, and they do it by the types of hosts they allow their users to see.
They can suppress certain types of results based on what they think you should be seeing, based on what your followers are presenting.
It's what Google and Facebook are doing on a regular basis by suppressing stories, by steering us towards other stories rather than the stories we're actually seeking. That's the real manipulation that's going on.
I was a design ethicist at Google, where I studied how do you ethically steer people's thoughts.
It will always favor one online music service over another and one candidate over another. Google and Facebook has the power to undermine democracy without us knowing that democracy has been undermined.
There's what I call the creepy line, and the Google policy about a lot of these things is to get right up to the creepy line but not cross it.
Google crosses the creepy line every day.
Streaming live from the Paul and Catherine Ranke Memorial Studio, this is TV Free Baltimore. Support for TV Free Baltimore comes from viewers like you. Become a TV Free Baltimore member by visiting patreon.com TV Free Baltimore.
As a public service, TV Free Baltimore provides a digital soapbox for those the mainstream media ignores. The opinions expressed in this live stream are not necessarily those of the owners, management, or underwriters of TV Free Baltimore. Furthermore, TV Free Baltimore streams hyper-local content focusing on politics and entertainment in the Baltimore viewing area. You're watching Maryland Politics here on TV Free Baltimore.
Welcome again to another issue of In, Around, and Through Maryland Politics with me, your amiable host, Kevin. Today I am very fortunate enough to be joined by a gentleman from Maryland Shall Issue. It is a Second Amendment advocate group. And please correct me if I pronounce your last name wrong. Mark Pennak?
Pennak.
Pennak, okay. Welcome, Mr. Pennak. Thank you for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
You're welcome. I've just heard of you in the last couple days, so please, and I don't know, I'm sure there might be many out there in our audience who haven't, so please just tell the audience a little bit about your group and what you do.
Maryland Shall Issue is a nonpartisan, all-volunteer group. I mean, we focus on the rights of law-abiding citizens to possess and carry firearms for their own self-protection and the protection of their families. We aim to educate people about those rights. We aim to educate them about the laws that surround the use of those weapons and firearms. So the idea here is to raise the consciousness of Marylanders to the existence of their Second Amendment rights that until the Supreme Court decided Heller and 2 years later McDonald in 2010 didn't exist in Maryland, because Maryland is one of the very few states anywhere in the Union that does not have a state constitutional counterpart to the Second Amendment. So firearm ownership in Maryland has always been a privilege that the state felt free to interfere with at their leisure, and they did.
So we're not dealing anything new in history for Maryland then?
So this is something very new for Maryland authorities, that acknowledge that people actually have constitutional rights at stake. And it's an uncomfortable transition for them, to which they have resisted mightily.
Okay.
So I understand from their perspective that they can't believe that the Second Amendment now applies to them, because state law and indeed federal law had held prior to McDonald in 2010 that it didn't apply to the states, and that it really wasn't even an individual right until Heller was decided in 2008. So there's a transition period where the authorities are having to get used to the idea, and they're not getting used to the idea very well.
Now, you mentioned educating people earlier, and could you tell us what things do you guys do? What ways things do you do to try to educate people?
Well, we try to educate people through our website, for one thing. What's going on in Annapolis, for example, is a legislation. We also try to educate people as to the laws in Maryland that surround the possession of weapons. And there's so many legal traps in Maryland associated with the mere transport of a firearm that it's frightening, because people are not aware of how easy it is to get into trouble. And for example, it's perfectly permissible to take your handgun from your home directly to the range. But if you stop on the way home to get gas, that transport is interrupted, and you're no longer transporting, you're stopping for gas. That could result in a 3-year jail sentence.
Wow.
Most people don't know that. Do they enforce it? Then you're up in the realm of prosecutorial discretion.
Okay.
And I've spent 33 years at the Department of Justice, and I will tell you, it's a fool's errand to trust a prosecutor. That's not their job.
Well, then that flies in conventional wisdom today, huh?
Well, it does, because you shouldn't be having to trust a prosecutor. The law should be so clear that people, common, ordinary intelligence and common education levels, ought to be able to read the law and understand it. But there are so many traps that people fall into them.
Now, if you don't mind me asking, what did you do in the Department of Justice? We can cut it out, or if you...
No,
if
that's
it's
fine. I'm happy to do that. I
Okay.
retired in late 2016 after 33 years at the Department of Justice. And the irony is that I represented the entire federal government in all these cases in the Supreme Court of the United States and the Federal Courts of Appeals, where I represented federal law enforcement agencies, for example, when they got sued and when they did things that were crossed the line. So my job was defense. And I also did some very sensitive security matters like Gitmo, Guantanamo Bay detainees. So that all those things are very sensitive, and for which I had a high security clearance, and I had to do a lot of things which I can't talk about.
So we have someone kind of from the other side, so to speak, now has... Once freed up as a civilian, free to...
I am freed up as a civilian in the sense that I am no longer bound by the rules, because once you're in the Department of Justice, they kind of own you. You can't practice law outside the Department of Justice. They frown on that.
Nice.
So, but after retirement, you really are free to do what you want. And I've always revered the Constitution, and the rule of law. So when I see what goes on in Maryland so often is that those principles are ignored or simply cast aside in the exercise of expediency. And that offends me deeply, which is why I want Maryland Show Issue to move forward. We bring lawsuits. We have several pending right now.
Okay.
So when 2 of our members were arrested in Annapolis for holding edgy signs on the sidewalks in front of the General Assembly, and the arrests, I used to do this on the other side, and I could see from the video that the arrests were completely illegal. So within a week, Maryland Show Issue and those 2 MSI members were in federal court, where we are now on that claim.
Wow. Okay.
So
awesome.
Those sort of things, we're going to defend the rights of our members and others to be able to make their voices heard, not to be ignored any longer.
And real active participation, not just
well,
up a banner or something to that.
We're not talking about playing patsy here. We go to court. So, and I'm willing to go to court because I'm a litigator. I like suing. So if we will continue to go to court. The Maryland gun owners and people who revere the Constitution have supported us in these efforts, and we need more support, but that has been coming too. So we are prepared to take and challenge in the federal courts where we have to. We prefer not to. I go to Annapolis every year to testify on some of these bills quite extensively, and it's very intensive. So one of these bills, for example, I had hearings that lasted almost 4 in the morning.
Wow.
On the 25th through 26th of February. So it is it's a lot of work.
Now you mentioned something that we may share, and I hear from a lot of folks, I'm former military myself, and having seen the sides of things that are wrong with it and then coming out, there are some folks, and it seems like you share this too, it motivates you to want to change the system that you left that was broken.
Well, I believe in the system because there are so many ways that you can influence the system. There is always a lot of obstacles to overcome, but I believe in the courts, and I believe in the rule of law, and eventually, I think, after a great amount of effort and time and money, you can achieve justice in this country, but it's not easy sometimes.
Yes, and I think you think that's accidental sometimes, or it seems when you mention that, because of a few of those ingredients, money and a few other things, that there are those that don't have those resources, so they kind of get left out.
They most certainly do. Okay. And I'll give you an example. One of the bills before the General Assembly now is a bill two bills actually, to abolish the Handgun Permit Review Board, yes, which is a civilian oversight of the state police when it comes to issuing carry permits. Carry permits in Maryland are very difficult to obtain. You have to have special reasons, better than your neighbors.
Okay.
You have to have actual threats or fall into a particular justifiable group of people, like state legislators, okay, who get permits for the asking. Unrestricted permits.
Okay.
So the General Assembly wants to abolish the Handgun Permit Review Board, which is a 5-member civilian oversight group who sits to judge whether the state police have acted reasonably in issuing permits or issuing restrictions on permits. And they've been issuing decisions lately. They've been overturning a lot of restrictions. And these restrictions, for example, allow a permit holder who shows a good and substantial reason to have a permit, and the state police are willing to give you, but they slap on the restrictions.
Okay.
The restrictions for a business owner might be, for example, while conducting business as owner of XYZ. Well, nobody knows what that means. Yeah. And I testified in front of the board a couple of years ago, and again very recently, as an expert witness. And I said, and I laid it all out in a constitutional brief. I said, here are the constitutional issues associated with that. And we've convinced the board that, wow, what you're doing is leading these permit holders into a trap because they're on the side of the road through a chance encounter, broken taillight. The officer will then be asking you, well, are you working inside your restrictions? Are you conducting business? Mm-hmm. And you may well be, but you may not be able to convince the officer. And while you're trying, you're basically being forced by the mere coercive circumstances you find yourself to be testifying against yourself, which is a violation of the Fifth Amendment. You're also shifting the burden from the officer, who has the duty to show that you're not within your restrictions, to yourself to show that you are. And that's a violation of the Due Process Clause.
That's nice, yeah.
And we've brought all this to the enlightenment of the board, and we've brought all this to the state police and said, stop issuing these vague restrictions. People can't comply with them because they're terrified that they're about to be arrested. And for a lot of people, being arrested, merely arrested, is catastrophic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because then they have an arrest record. They may have security clearance that they may be voided. They may lose their job. We had an incident out in Hagerstown where a bail bondsman was actually forced to pull his concealed weapon that he had license for and they had a permit to carry. And he wasn't arrested for doing so on a knife attack. I mean, it was a perfectly valid defense. But he was arrested for carrying outside of his restrictions. And it took him 2 months before those charges were dropped.
Wow.
Meanwhile, he could not work. We had another person in the city of Baltimore who was a security guard, was called by his boss to come into work and bring the handgun that he was licensed to carry with a carry permit, stopped on the way, arrested for carrying outside his permit restrictions.
Wow.
And he spent the night in jail.
Wow. So, and I'm sure there are a lot of other people that have, even that may not affect their current job, but these days future jobs, or even applying for apartments and all kinds of things.
That's right. Once you have an arrest record, that follows you a long ways. We had one person who had to get it expunged in order to do his business, and under Maryland law, a little quirk of Maryland law, it's right in the criminal procedure article, 10-105, if memory serves, is that you have to waive your rights to sue for unlawful arrest if you want it expunged within the first 3 years. Yeah. Nice. Huh?
That takes a second to sink in.
Yeah, you think about that. Well, I was severely damaged by this unlawful arrest, but I have to waive my right to recover damages for it in order to get it expunged.
Wow.
When the case was non-pros, which means the charges were dropped without any prosecution at all. And that's kind of wrong.
Slightly. But it's very normal and common abuse, from someone of your perspective, that this government does on state and federal levels.
Well, the government holds all the cards. So he needed to have that thing expunged. So he gave up his right to recover.
Wow.
And he was severely damaged. He spent time in jail.
Wow.
So that's wrong. So the state police don't care. They say to the permit holder, well, you decide how you're carrying on in your business. You decide whether or not you're within your restrictions. And just explain to the officer how you're within your restrictions. Just, you take care of it. But they don't seem to care that poses all these constitutional issues.
Oh. Now, what would you say the attitude with law enforcement has been in your experience? Because now you have that law enforcement officer as the arbiter right then and there, right? As the judge, do you not?
You do indeed.
Okay.
And he's not supposed to arrest but for a probable cause. But carrying outside your restrictions is the same thing as carrying without a permit at all.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a 3-year jail time and a minimum of 30 days on a first offense. So it's a very serious charge. And most law enforcement officers in this state basically will slap the handcuffs on you and ask questions later.
Okay.
But he can't do that unless he's able to show probable cause that you're carrying outside his restrictions. So by making you basically try to explain, you're talking against your own self-interest.
Gotcha. Okay.
So there are thousands of law enforcement officers in this state. Some are very good, some are not so good. And the city of Baltimore has demonstrated that. So you're basically playing Russian roulette with a half-loaded cylinder, depending on what kind of officer you're going to find on any given day.
Yes. So now let me ask you this. Maybe somebody in the audience thought of it as they heard you. So if you were going to incriminate yourself when speaking to the law enforcement officer, someone from the legal, what would you advise one of us mere mortals in the non-legal world? What should we say when asked that question?
Let's assume that you have a carry permit. Let's assume you have one of these vague restrictions on it. And there's no duty to tell the officer when you're pulled over that you actually are armed legally.
Okay.
So,
unless he asked?
There's no duty to even say it then.
Okay.
So you don't have to talk to the officer. You have to give him your license, your registration, your proof of insurance. But you don't have to carry on a discussion with him, nor are you required to answer his questions. These are basic constitutional protections.
Yes.
And you can assert at any time your Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. Now, that's going to be deemed to be uncooperative by the law enforcement officers. Yep. And there are more than one law enforcement officers, and you see this in the case law, which they get kind of annoyed at that.
Yes.
So you're basically rolling the dice there whether or not he's going to follow the line, which he's supposed to just give you the ticket for the broken taillight and leave.
Okay.
And there's a very recent Supreme Court case called Rodriguez that says the police may keep you there on the side of the road only for so long as necessary to carry out the original purposes of the stop.
Oh, okay.
So broken taillight, give the ticket for the broken taillight and leave. They're not supposed to keep you there ad infinitum looking for other reasons.
In essence, an interrogation of sorts.
An interrogation or an opportunity. So they're supposed to let you go at that point.
Okay.
Unless you say something or do something or they see something that gives them reason to believe that you have committed a crime, or not, like they look in the backseat and they see a bale of marijuana. Okay, yes. Well, that's probable cause. Of course,
right? Yes.
So what your objective is to get home as soon as possible. So my suggestion to my colleagues is that, just say, I would like to be on my way, officer. Here's my license, here's my insurance card, and here's my registration.
So, and just in that, when let's say the officer asks if you have the weapon on me, and I say yes.
Well, then he's going to investigate.
Okay.
Because for good and very good reasons, police get up nervous when someone they stop have firearms, because an awful lot of law enforcement officers are shot at stops like that.
Yes.
So it's up to his discretion at that point to interrogate you. And here's the downside of what I just told you. If he perceives that you have a weapon and you don't tell him about that ahead of time, you're likely to be looking down the barrel of his 9mm pistol, because he then sees you as a threat.
Yes.
And that has real tragic consequences, possibly.
Yes.
So the law enforcement officers want to know right up front whether or not they're dealing with someone who's armed. That's why they often ask. Now, with a restricted permit, you have a real conundrum. Do I tell them and there keep myself on the side of the road while he investigates whether or not I'm traveling within the scope of my restrictions?
Wow.
Or do I not tell him and have him see that and get the risk of getting shot because he thinks I'm a threat?
Yes.
That's tough. Now, if you have an unrestricted permit, the advice is different. And members of the General Assembly who have carry permits are all unrestricted.
Okay.
Because there's deemed to be at an assumed risk position in the state police's eyes. Okay. So those people, they turn on the lights over the car, put their hands on the steering wheel, say, yes, officer, I do. I have a carry permit, and here it is. And how can I help you? What can I do to make you the most comfortable person in the whole world so that you perceive that I'm not a threat?
Yeah.
So we all go home happy. So, and if you have an unrestricted permit, then the officer looks at it and looks at the back of it and says, well, no restrictions, you didn't do anything with it, so have a nice day. Off you go. And that's how it should happen.
Okay.
So the advice is different depending on the type of restriction. And that has some real life legal consequences.
Which I think gets missed a lot in the arguments of everything, that there are real people every day that have things that happen in their lives that affect them and massively.
I will tell you for sure that people with restricted permits are terrified of this sort of encounter. They're terrified of being called upon on the side of the road to explain whether or not they're carrying within the restrictions, because the restrictions are so vague. They're terrified of being arrested because the officer simply doesn't believe them.
Yes.
They're terrified of spending the night in jail. These are all the most law-abiding people on the surface of the planet. I mean, they've been background checked to the ends of the earth.
Yes.
They commit fewer crimes on average nationwide than the police officers do. So they're not accustomed with adversarial dealings with the police officer. So they're all basically terrified by the very chance of having to getting arrested. And it has happened. And in written testimony I gave the Senate just this last Friday, I detailed 4 instances that I have the case files on where this has actually happened.
Wow.
And we have videotaped evidence from a renowned civil rights attorney in the city of Baltimore where he says it happens all the time. So it is, the risk of arbitrary and discriminatory enforcement is real and has happened. And that's reality. So you have a street reality to deal with, and then you have the legal reality to deal with.
Yeah. Now, but in saying this, you've gone in and testified, and I know one of the groups just met last Friday. How is this having any effect, and where do you see it going?
Well, for example, one of the reasons that they wanted to abolish the Handgun Permit Review Board, because the board was actually reversing restrictions on carry permits.
Okay.
And they were doing so to the tune of too many, in the view of some of the senators. But the senators did not realize that it was simply, most of those, by vast majority of the reversals of the state police, were for permit restrictions and not for permits themselves.
Okay.
So this is a person who's already been deemed by the state police to have a permit, and it's perfectly proper for them to, but they were afraid of the consequences of having a vague restriction. And they didn't understand, the members of the Senate, that it was mostly restrictions, and mostly because permit holders were terrified of being arrested. And that kind of a light went off in their heads, and I'm not so sure that it's going to make a difference.
Okay.
Because it seems like the leadership in the Senate has decided that they want to get rid of the Handgun Permit Review Board. And that leaves review solely at an agency called the Office of Administrative Hearings, which is a trial-type proceeding before an administrative law judge. It's very formal, and you need basically a lawyer.
Okay. And
ka-ching. Right? So the beauty of the Handgun Permit Review Board is that it's 5 people, civilians, including in the current board, a law enforcement officer, a security company executive, a lawyer, and others, people who are really very knowledgeable about firearms and the law. But that wasn't good enough to the members of the Senate who wanted to get rid of it entirely.
Well, maybe they're just jealous because somebody actually knows something about what they're doing.
Well, they just want the result they want.
Okay.
And I don't think they realized that citizens were just terrified because of the restrictions. We conveyed that to them, and it had an impact. I'm not all confident it was sufficient, but I'm hopeful that they will rethink this in light of what they heard.
Okay.
We have another hearing on Tuesday before the House Judiciary Committee at 1 o'clock in the afternoon in Annapolis, where we're going to convey the same message, that what you're concerned about is these reversals, or almost all reversals on permit restrictions. And why would you want to terrify your citizens this way, that are the most law-abiding people in the whole state of Maryland?
Now, are there any representatives or senators you can think of offhand so that we can tell the viewers out there, hey, contact these folks and let them know your displeasure with this?
Well, every member of the Senate Executive Nominations Committee sat on this on last Friday.
Okay.
And it was a joint committee meeting, and every member of the Senate Judicial Proceedings Committee was also on that. So to the extent you have one of those senators on your in your district, and you can easily tell that by going to the Maryland General Assembly webpage and entering your address where it says voice your opinion, and you will find out who your representatives are.
Yes, and it will show you what committees and everything.
It shows you what the committees. You click on the individual's name, and you have the whole biological information, including what committees they sit on. But all this will come to the floor, so everyone should be talking to their representatives about how unfair this is. Now, the number of permits in Maryland is tiny. By far.
Okay. Do you have any idea what number there?
Yes, it's around. State police have reported it's around 20,000 for a population of over 6 million in Maryland. By comparison, 12% of the adult population in Pennsylvania, well over 1 million people, have a permit in Pennsylvania.
Wow.
8% of the adult population in Virginia have permits.
Okay.
District of Columbia, by judicial ruling now, is a shall issue jurisdiction, and they are issuing to law-abiding citizens in the District of Columbia, even though the District of Columbia, ironically, copied Maryland's law when they were forced to start issuing permits a few years ago.
Okay.
So that's been declared unconstitutional. This is good cause requirement. And so the District of Columbia now has to issue them.
Okay.
Now, they're not handing these things out like candy. You have to get 16 hours of training. You have to get fingerprinted. You have to have your background investigated. It takes months.
That's what another guest has told me. Roughly about 6 months is what the process.
6 months. You have to have a live fire qualification. I teach this course, so I've actually taught people how to do this. So you have to have a certain score on that course. So it's not easy.
Okay.
And most people off the street, once they're familiar with how handguns work, probably wouldn't pass it.
Wow.
Simply because the qualification course is that demanding. So this is not a simple process just to get to the point where you can make the application.
Gotcha.
So right now you have to make the application before you even apply. You have to get all that training before you even apply.
Wow. And what would you say the dollar amount for all that is, roughly? Just
training varies a lot. You can Isaac Walton Lake, I think, charges over $350 for that. Some people charge more. So it all depends on whether or not you can get into a class, because you have to teach a class, because you can't economically, instructor can't economically teach this on a one-by-one basis.
Yes.
And then you have to find a range. And most of the ranges in Maryland are privately owned. So you have to get permission of the range to be able to conduct a class.
Nice, okay.
It's live fire.
Yes.
So it's not easy.
Wow.
Like, for example, there are no ranges in the city of Baltimore whatsoever, except for the police range.
Okay.
So anybody who lives in the city of Baltimore has to go outside the city to even get a handgun qualification license, which is just a permit to be able to buy a handgun.
Just in viewing from this one in general, talking to yourself and other folks, it seems like this is really disproportionately affects the lower income levels in Baltimore.
And I think it's designed to do that.
Okay. That was my next question.
It really is.
Okay.
One of the reasons that the state police instituted the live fire requirement for get a handgun qualification license, it's not in the statute, by the way.
Okay.
It's by state police regulation. And they require the applicant fire 1 live round. Now, any trainer with assault will tell you 1 live round does nothing.
Nothing, yes.
Right? You can teach someone how to use a handgun using dummy rounds or snapcats. So you don't need to actually have a live round. But if you fire a live round, you have to be on a range.
Yes.
And the nearest ranges in Baltimore are outside the Beltway. So you're going to have to find an instructor who has access to that range, who has willing to loan you a handgun for firing that live round, and be able to have a class for that. That basically disqualifies virtually everybody in the city of Baltimore who doesn't have a means of affluence.
Yes.
The idea here is to make sure that the inner city of Baltimore can't buy handguns.
I was going to say, does this sound like a reasonable scenario under what you're saying?
It's
Someone who's currently in Baltimore, comes from a poor neighborhood, but a very dangerous area, wants to protect their property. They're almost immediately barred from exercising their Second Amendment right, just from cost and other prohibitive measures.
Absolutely. So to get a handgun qualification license, they require 4 hours of formal training, which means you have to pay a private instructor.
Yes.
The application fee is $50. The fingerprint fee is between $50 and $70. And then you have to have a computer and a scanner to submit all that online, because the state police won't take paper copies.
Okay.
So you need all that. And it's have a nice, reliable internet connection. So, and a credit card, because they won't accept cash, they won't accept checks.
Wow.
So the whole idea is to create an obstacle to the exercise of the right to purchase. And no one disputes, not even the state police, not even the state attorney general's office, that there is a constitutional right to purchase. Because there's a constitutional right to possess, that means that also encompasses within it the constitutional right to actually go ahead and purchase it. But they do everything they can to make that as hard as possible. And you don't have to guess at the reasons. It's right there in the legislative history.
So from someone outside the legal part, that clearly is, if the Constitution says no laws to infringe upon it.
How?
Yes.
Well, that question will be answered. Maryland Show Issue has challenged that law, that handgun qualification law, in court, in federal court now.
Okay.
We're presently at what's called cross motions for summary judgment before a federal judge.
Okay.
And those motions are pending. We don't have a hearing date yet. We spent the last year and a half fighting with the state attorney general's office about, first they filed a motion to dismiss, and then that had months of delay.
Wow.
And then the judge says, no, they've stated a claim under the Second Amendment, so they get to proceed. And there was lots of discovery. For example, we found out in discovery, and the state police resisted this, that over 30,000 people tried to get a handgun qualification license by actually starting the permit process. You have to be online to do that.
Okay.
But over 30,000 gave up because it was so complicated.
Okay, gotcha.
And there's so many requirements. They may not have been able to get the training. They may not have been able to get buy the training or the fingerprinting. The fingerprinting is, by the way, has to be live scan only. You can't go to the neighborhood police department and get fingerprints. You have to find this private vendor who will do an electronic fingerprint.
No kidding.
Yeah. So, and in the rural parts of Maryland, you may have to travel hundreds of miles.
Wow.
Right, because there's one in McHenry in Garrett County, near the ski resort Wisp. There's one, the next closest one is Cumberland.
Okay.
And the one coming due east from Cumberland, the next one is Hagerstown. And there's one in all those places.
Wow.
So they don't make it easy. And some counties in the Eastern Shore don't have any at all.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, this is no accident.
This is no accident.
So in your suit against, is there, I assume that's a single entity suing the government?
Well, Maryland Show Issue has a number of private plaintiffs as well.
Okay.
So that we are joined with a number of individuals who are also members of MSI.
Okay.
And so that's to establish our standing that here there are real people here being hurt.
Yes.
There are real people who can't do the training for they have medical disabilities, for example. There are real people who don't find the time in their busy lives to go find 4 hours of instructor from an instructor who's willing to do it, because you need classes for that too.
Yes.
Who don't have the money necessarily to pay all these fees, because that acts as a barrier as well. And all for what? Well, to create a barrier, because we don't like people owning handguns. It's the message the state is sending.
Kind of the reason I asked that question, do you need more people? I mean, is it better as a smaller group or a larger group coming from a legal mind too? If, let's say, there's the 30,000 people you're talking about, is it better to have just 10 of them suing the government to get this, or is it better to have all 30,000 of them?
Well, it's better to have a few plaintiffs for sure, more than one, because that gives real life experience to these restrictions. Maryland Show Issue can, as an organization, represent all of its members. So if you want to be covered by the resulting judgment, if we win, for example, that would cover everybody who's a member.
Okay. Well, so there's a good reason to become
a member. There's a good reason to become a member right there.
All right.
And it's not that expensive. For a box of ammunition, you can become a member of MSI. Okay. So it's, but we need that kind of support because litigation is expensive.
Yes. Yes.
And without the funds of our membership and contributors, we can't bring these suits.
There you go. You did the part about, hey, is there any events or anything to get people to come join your cause? I think that was pretty smooth.
Well, that's the hard reality. Yes. If you go to the Maryland Show Issue page on the website, it's donate and join on the top left corner, and just click on those buttons and we take credit cards.
There you go.
So we need the help and we need the support, and we need people most of all to be active, to actually take the time to set up an appointment with their representative. And it doesn't matter how anti the representative is, because they're still your constituent, right? So you still have them to talk to, and they will hear you. Set up an appointment, say, I want to talk to you about X. And they will set up an appointment for you. You may not only get to see a staffer, but because you're a constituent, they will set up an appointment for you. You can tell them. And they can then associate the name with the issue, the face with an actual concern. And there is no politician in Maryland that wants to ignore all the wishes of all of his constituents. So they have to take that into account.
Yeah, yes. And maybe this too, a thought you bring up, if you live in a neighborhood, maybe where everyone can't get there, take the names of, nominate someone from the neighborhood.
It certainly says, here's a list of people that can't be here and who share my views, and they want to make sure that you understand that they're with me on this this point. Or you can go in as a small group. You can go in, and if you can't do that, we recommend that the most because that's the most effective. Then write a letter. Failing that, write an email. Failing that, pick up the phone call and call them.
I was going to say we had Lauren Ericon on, and she was, remember what she said, folks, call, fax, email at the end, but they really hate when you blow up their phones and their fax machines. So,
well, that's right, they do. And they really hate getting that kind of email from non-constituents because that just goes into the trash can.
Yeah.
So you need to be targeted to your representatives. And they will listen if only make a show of listening.
Yeah.
But people need to understand that they can have an impact. I have seen it.
Yes.
Where people, we had, for example, all these gun owners who had restricted permits show up on Friday to tell the Senate Executive Nominations and the Senate Judicial Proceedings Committee that, yes, I'm terrified. This is real to me. Please listen to me. And by the end of that several hours of testifying, we had members of this committee say, wow, I had no idea. So yes, you can have an impact. And it does make a difference.
You know, I think people don't realize, and you can really attest to this too, how often, and I had another guest speak of this as well, how unaware that the legislators are of anything about these bills that they're passing or the effects.
The ignorance is profound. I mean,
I'm glad you said that.
It truly is profound, and it's shameful that they're legislating because most of this legislation attacks criminal penalties. So the favorite avenue seems to be either 3 years in prison or 5 years in prison for violating these provisions. And we had one provision, it was HB 96, which banned a transfer between temporary transfer, no matter how temporary, and as long as it didn't take place at a range while you were immediately adjacent to the person, as long as it was gratuitous, you could do that. That would mean that a husband who owned a handgun, if he left the house and left the gun with his wife, that was guilty of a transfer, and he'd land both of them in jail for 5 years. If I lend it to my son, who's a first lieutenant Marine and a law enforcement officer in Virginia, and he went to the range and left the house, he goes to jail for 5 years, and so would I.
Wow.
This is, insane consequences they don't seem to understand because they don't have any experience themselves with firearms, much less with the understanding of the legitimacy of the right to self-protection.
Yes.
And in our testimony that we submitted to the board, but also to the legislature, we detail hundreds of thousands of cases nationwide where people have used firearms successfully to defend their lives, including 10 cases out of 50 where they stopped mass shootings. So it's a positive social good. And no one's suggesting that prohibited persons should have firearms. We don't endorse that in the slightest.
Yes, no.
But the normal law-abiding person has every right to protect themselves and their families.
Well, it's kind of like you said, that any of these processes, even in some other states where they're not so prohibitive, the only people that seem to go apply for these licensings are your law-abiding citizens anyway.
Oh, they are the most law-abiding people on the face of the planet. They are background investigated. They commit fewer crimes than police officers. I don't think in Maryland a permit holder has ever committed a crime of violence, or at least even been arrested, much less convicted of a crime of violence while holding a permit.
Wow.
So these people are really law-abiding. And with restricted permits, they're terrified. And that's just so unfair.
I agree.
So there are other bills, are coming up this session. And
I was going to ask, are there any other bills that you'd like to...
Sure.
I'm holding the sheet, yeah.
Well, I'll give you one, for example, the handgun qualification license that they have that whole regimen that they have law They've imposed on law-abiding individuals to actually purchase. They want to duplicate that, impose it for the purchase of long guns, ordinary shotguns and hunting rifles. So that you wouldn't be able to transfer a hunting rifle, you wouldn't be able to buy a hunting rifle, you wouldn't be able to buy a goose gun unless you had 7 days wait. You had to get a long gun qualification license, like a handgun qualification license. You had 4 hours of training to do that. You have to find an instructor for that. You have to pay all these fees and get fingerprinted and wait 7 days, 30 days to be able to get the license, and another 7 days to actually purchase.
Wow.
So it became a legal nightmare. And the irony is that long guns are almost never used in crime. So yeah, once in a while, no doubt. But I'll give you an example. Like 2017, and these are FBI statistics, so they're really not open to reasonable dispute. There were 475 murders in Maryland.
Okay.
Of which long guns accounted for, guess, 8. 8. 5 rifle, 3 shotgun.
Huh.
You know how many were accounted for by knives? 44.
Oh, okay. Now that doesn't surprise me at all.
Blunt objects? 50. By hands and feet? 11.
Okay.
So what is the marginal utility associated with regulating long guns when you're more likely to get killed with hands and feet?
Well, I think seems to be a common thing ringing through this. This really has nothing to do.
Has nothing to do with public safety.
Yes.
It has everything to do with control.
Yes. Yep.
And how unfortunate is that, to treat a constitutional right like that?
It's unnatural, and I think it not only in this aspect, but many aspects that we're going through. We're fighting natural law here.
Well, the Supreme Court recognized in Heller that this is not a right in the Second Amendment that's recognized by the Second Amendment. It's a pre-existing right.
Exactly.
The right of self-defense pre-existed the enactment of our Constitution. It pre-existed the founding. It pre-existed much of English history, so it's been recognized for 1,000 years that people have a right to self-defense. And why not? If your life is threatened, are you expected to simply lie there?
Well, I don't think people realize how basic that is, because
it's basic, isn't it?
It is, but if you go through life and you've never been in that experience where that is, unless you come down with a sickness or an illness or something to that effect. But
well, I asked some of my colleagues at the Department of Justice when I was still there, and this is especially the new mothers who are sometimes said, "Well, you would defend your child with your life, and I would. I'm a parent of 5, and I would too. And wouldn't you rather be effective or ineffective?" And the statistics are overwhelming that the most effective way to defend your life is with a firearm.
Yes.
And the least likely you are to actually suffer harm.
Well, I think there's other, and you may be able to, other ones that say even if you possess a firearm, you're less likely to be targeted for a crime anyways.
Well, criminals, they're not stupid in this regard. They avoid people who they think might be armed because they don't like getting shot.
Yeah.
Seems pretty rational.
So, like they avoid police officers.
Yes, exactly. So getting shot is a bad thing.
Right.
So they are very aware of the likelihood of that, and they seek to minimize it. And most of the defensive uses of firearms, no shots are fired, simply because pulling it out is enough.
Oh, yeah.
And that's where most of the numbers come from. Defensive use of firearms and legitimate defensive use of firearms comes from people who are deterred from carrying out the attack. Who the homeowner pulls the gun in there, and the person who's breaking in says, "Holy cow, I'm out of here," and runs. So you don't have to shoot somebody.
Yes. Yeah.
And I understand that's pretty traumatic, and believe me, the legal consequences associated with that are profound.
Well, that's a whole nother ballgame.
That's a whole nother ballgame. And, when I teach this course, I go into that rather at length. So it's the legal consequences of defensive use of firearm are far less if you don't shoot them. But if you pull it out and they continue to press the attack, you may have to shoot them.
Yeah. I would, as a former soldier, I can speak on this, and I would hope any law enforcement officer would say the same. You train with a weapon and hope to never have to pull that trigger.
Oh, sure.
So, no different for a common civilian carrying any kind of weapon either.
So, what the difference is that you teach awareness, and teach a frame of reference, and I teach an attitude sort of that you have a huge responsibility. associated with carrying a firearm. And you must use that within the bounds of the law. But if you have to use it, then you must use it, because the alternative is to die, or in the parlance of the law, severe bodily harm.
Oh, yeah.
So you have to be able to actually exercise that option. And if you don't think you can, you shouldn't be carrying at all. So those are the things you try to teach when you try to teach the course, is for people to have to think about that. So if their religion is such, for example, that they couldn't possibly see themselves as ever actually pulling the trigger, then it's probably better for them not to be carrying.
You bring up an excellent point, because I think a lot of times out there, the imagery that gets thrown about of people who are fighting for these gun rights, or that will go apply for these licensings, or your wild cowboys just off firing weapons in the air, on Friday night or something.
Yes, but blood in the streets.
Well, but I mean, it's that is good. That it is taught as a responsibility. The people that are being produced through this system, so to speak, of education, this is a responsibility, not, like I said, a bunch of wild cowboys on Friday night.
Well, and that's why the statistics about how responsible carry permit holders are so persuasive. We had a recent study, we gave it to the General Assembly this year, done in 2019, January, where there's no incident. The statistics are overwhelming that there is no increase in violent crime associated through liberalization of carry permits.
Yes.
So it doesn't result in misuse of firearms. It doesn't result in violent crime. It doesn't even result in more assaults. It simply results in people being able to defend themselves from time to time when they have to.
Yeah.
And that's a positive social good.
And those numbers seem to be out there even nationally.
Those are national numbers.
Yeah.
They certainly are true in Maryland. But again, there's a tiny fraction of 1% of the adults in Maryland have carry permits. Because they make it so difficult. That will change.
Well, I hope so, and I hope so.
It will change because Maryland's going to be drug kicking and screaming into the 21st century, whether they like it or not, because the court rulings are all trending that way.
Yes.
So before the Supreme Court now is a case for presenting that very issue, whether a good cause requirement is constitutional. The D.C. government discovered, to their chagrin, when the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, that's the United States Court of Appeals, struck down a good cause requirement, saying it is unconstitutional. You have to let ordinary citizens be able to carry. Sure, they have to do all the training, they have to do the fingerprinting, they have to do the background check, they have to do all that. You can give permits to people who have prone to violence, for example. And Maryland has a separate criteria for that.
Yeah.
But you just can't isolate it to the elite. You just can't give it to members of the General Assembly or security guards.
The wealthy.
Or the wealthy, or the affluent, or people who carry cash all around in businesses. Because everybody's life is important, regardless of whether or not they carry cash.
Yes.
And my life is just as important as that of a member of the General Assembly.
The most lowly in Baltimore to the President of the Senate. Exactly.
Exactly right.
Yep.
So it simply can't parse out the right in that way. And that's what the D.C. Circuit held. And we think the Supreme Court will agree, because now there is a square conflict in the circuits. And in Supreme Court parlance, and I practiced there for many years, that's a criteria for agreeing to review the issue. So the petition for certiorari that's now before the Supreme Court presents that conflict squarely. And so we think the court will probably review it, if not in that case, and multiple other cases are falling in the same queue. And we'll get a resolution of that question.
Well, I hope so too. And it seems like you have a lot of supporters. And,
well, we do, and we're grateful for them.
And I would like to follow that and keep in touch with you as you go through this process. And if you'd be so kind to.
I would be delighted to do so, because there is a case the Supreme Court has already agreed to hear, and that's called the New York City transport case.
Okay.
Brought by the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association, in which the New York City said, licensed gun owner, you have a license to have it in your home, it's a handgun, but you may only transport that handgun to and from directly one of 7 ranges within the city of New York. You can't transport it anywhere outside the city of New York. You can't transport it over the river into New Jersey or into Pennsylvania, or to take it anywhere to do a competition, for example, or to go to a range. You can only transport it there. And if you happen to have another home in the state of New York, and one of the plaintiffs in that case does, well, you can't take that gun to your other home. You have to have a separate gun for that home.
Wow.
So, I mean, it's irrational.
Yes.
Basically. But the Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit said, it's fine. And the Supreme Court took that case, which is on the merits, which is now probably going to be argued this coming October. So we'll get a decision on that case, and which may establish the proper framework, or as the lawyers call it, the standard of review for reviewing the constitutionality of state gun laws.
Okay.
And one thing for sure, it seems really clear to those of us who follow Supreme Court practice that they took it to reverse. So that New York City law is going to fall.
Good. I'm sure there's some happy folks in New York.
And
some not so happy folks too, I'd imagine.
To get a gun license in New York, it costs you $340.
Wow.
And then you have to renew it and pay another $340. So it's expensive, and it's limited to the affluent again.
I was going to say, once again,
and it takes over a year.
Yes. Okay.
So it's breathtaking what the obstacles that they erect in trying to keep people from owning firearms in New York.
Well, we're behind you in keeping Marylanders the right to bear.
Well, we hope to make progress in the courts. I don't have particularly high hopes that the General Assembly will see sense. That has been the history of the General Assembly. But we try. And just for the record, I'm happy to talk with them, because I'm kind of a cognitive dissonance for members of the General Assembly. I'm a lawyer. I worked in the Department of Justice for many years. So it's hard to categorize me as someone that they like to characterize gun owners as gun-waving crazy people.
Yes.
But we're not, and they need to know that.
Yes.
We're law-abiding people who simply want to be able to defend ourselves.
And I was going to say, for you folks out there, that the name of the group is Maryland Shall Issue. And if you have any concern or anything that he is talking about, find out who your representative is and contact them this weekend, next week. Any of the stuff that we've mentioned. Visit the website. Join. I hear the join and donate buttons are not hard to find.
Oh, they're easy.
We try to keep them that way on ours too.
Well, big red buttons are hard to miss, but it's easy to find your representatives. Go to the General Assembly website,
and it's free. And I believe even to peruse the website, because I did it earlier today,
it is free.
It's absolutely free as well.
And sign up with our email list, because we have a huge email list that we send out alerts to for people to get the information what's going on, and that costs nothing.
There you go. Well, there's a lot to remember and everything, so the folks here are even willing to take on that risk of being your reminder of when things come up.
And that's right, and people respond to that.
Yes, they do. Anything that you'd like to say that I didn't mention or we forgot, or just in general before I...
Now is the time to contact your legislator.
Yes.
It's sine die. The last day of the General Assembly is April 8th. All this gun legislation is coming up for votes now.
Yes, there is.
So now is the time to pick up the phone, make an appointment, go see your legislator. It doesn't have to be in Annapolis. It can be in the district office as well, because all these guys have district offices.
Yes.
And go see them and tell them how you feel. And it really doesn't matter that you don't think you'll be heard. You will be heard, and they will at least have some impact. And so politics is a game played on the margins. So all you need to do is sway enough people to make them hesitate, and they say, well, this isn't worth the candle.
Yes.
Or as some of the jargon goes, the juice isn't worth the squeeze.
Well, and that other saying, too, that goes with the squeaky wheel gets the grease, too.
So, well, it does.
And a lot of, well, and it's true, I'm sure you've witnessed it many times. It doesn't matter necessarily the issue, the rights or wrong of it, but who the most people show up and back one side or the other.
Citizen participation is absolutely key, because they're not used to that. They're not used to ordinary people coming up and showing up in their offices, knocking on the door and says, I want to be heard. Because it's difficult to get to Annapolis. I mean, people have work for a living.
Yes.
They have to take time off.
Yep.
But if you value your rights, indeed the right not to be arrested arbitrarily, for doing things you've done for, in this country, hundreds of years, for example, in some of these transfer bills, you need to stand up and make your views known, because we can't do it for you.
Even though you're trying.
We're trying, but we can't do it alone.
No, you can't. And one thing you reminded me of, the civic participation. That's been the crux of this whole show, and hopefully my ideal for bringing people like you on is to encourage civic participation.
Absolutely.
These days.
Absolutely. And we tell everyone, you have to be polite. You need to go in and just tell them your story. civility is absolutely critical. You don't have to pound on tables. All you do is be there. Associate your face and the right that you want to have them to be aware of, and to vote accordingly. So, and then make sure you're a registered voter. I mean, you'd be amazed how many people aren't registered voters.
Well, yes, there are. No, I've seen the participation numbers in voting, and I always wonder: are these people not registered, or a bunch of registered voters not just showing up?
Well, both actually.
Yes.
And the primaries in this state are where so much of this is decided.
Yes.
And so people need to participate in the primaries every year. Election years, there's a primary. Vote up and vote on those. I mean, I have.
And I have too. Mr. Pennak, thank you very, very much for joining me today.
My pleasure.
I've learned a lot today from the two guests I've had, and I really would like the opportunity to follow up on this Supreme Court. And remember, I've said this every time, even though you may not own a gun, this issue, I promise you, affects a neighbor, a family member, somebody you know will be affected by this, even if you aren't a gun owner yourself. So participation, 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 please.
Absolutely.
And thank you for joining us, and thank you for joining me again, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you again, sir.
You're watching Maryland Politics here on TV Free Baltimore.
The Second Amendment of the U.S. Constitution states that the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, and libertarians support that. Unfortunately, many people are unfamiliar with guns, and unscrupulous politicians turn that ignorance into fear. When discussing firearm laws, the purpose of guns always comes up. Critics will say things like, "I'm okay with hunting, but you shouldn't be able to own a military assault rifle like an AR-15. The Constitution does not protect the right to bear arms for hunting or sport. It's for the security of a free state. That means defending ourselves from crime and government tyranny. The number one obstacle our military faces when we occupy foreign countries is armed citizens. In the unlikely event that our government crossed that line, an armed populace would be crucial to resisting. In the last decade alone, there have been dozens of military coups across the globe, and we're not special. It could happen here. And let's not forget that governments murder more people than all killers throughout history combined. And when gun control advocates attack specific guns, be skeptical. AR-15s are not assault rifles. AR stands for Armalite rifle. To an untrained person, an AR-15 is a Rambo-esque weapon of mass destruction. Yet the Ruger Mini 14 fires the same .223 caliber ammunition, can fit the same 30-round magazine, and has the same firing rate as an AR. But no one's trying to ban it, because it's brown. Everyone is concerned about the frequency of mass shootings in this country. It's hard to pin down the exact number because the criteria for what constitutes a mass shooting keeps changing. Gun control groups skew data in their favor, and pro-gun groups do the same. The most objective figures show that although firearm sales are up, acts of violence are declining. Fewer people are dying, fewer violent deaths everywhere, even though the news would have you believe otherwise. Government doesn't have to solve every problem. There are some rules we can all follow to keep us safe from guns. Always treat every firearm as though it is loaded. Always keep the muzzle pointed in a safe direction. Keep your finger outside the trigger guard until ready to shoot. Always be sure of your target and what's in front of it and behind it. And if you've got kids in the house, lock up your firearms. Teach them to respect weapons when they get older. That takes care of the vast majority of gun-related injuries. While it might feel cold and heartless, we can't let feelings dictate reality. Heart disease and falling out of bed kill more people than guns. Unfortunately, grandstanding about bed rails doesn't win elections.
Hi. Hi. I'm Dawn Wells, and guess what? You are watching TV Free Baltimore.
You're watching Maryland Politics here on TV Free Baltimore.
Welcome aboard to another edition of Inside, Around, and Through Maryland Politics with your host, Kevin Caldwell. This evening, I'm lucky enough to be joined by two gentlemen. The first gentleman, named Jonathan Grease, is from the Baltimore County Libertarian Subcommittee. Baltimore City, sorry. Right. Baltimore City Subcommittee. And also David Dahl from the Arundel County Libertarian Subcommittee. Did I say that all that right?
Close enough.
Okay,
yep.
Close enough. Well,
thanks for having us.
Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you very much for being here tonight. First, let me just give you the opportunity to introduce yourself and your group and tell us just a little bit about the Baltimore City Libertarian Subcommittee.
Sure. Baltimore City Libertarians is a subcommittee of the Libertarian Party of Maryland, which basically means we are the official local branch of the state Libertarian Party. And the state party itself is an affiliate of the Libertarian Party of the United States. So we are the Libertarian Party in Baltimore City.
All right, very good. David, tell us a little bit about the Anne Arundel folks there.
So, just like Baltimore City, we're the subcommittee representing Anne Arundel County. We have been blessed with a very rambunctious and energetic core. We got 20 members now, and we've been having monthly meetings since June. And I see a lot of potential in the future. We're really getting the ball rolling. I see a lot of excitement.
Very nice. And for some of you that aren't involved in this area, 20 members in a group of the Libertarian Party is a good group of people. That's quite a turnout, so congratulations. First, and I'll start with you since I'll jump around a little bit. What does the group stand for? What's the main focus of the group, would you say?
You mean the Anne Arundel County Libertarian specific, or just the Libertarian Party in general?
No, we're specifically about the Anne Arundel County. We'll stick to the local part. What is tell us about what the group stands for, a little bit what you're trying to do.
Well, besides, we uphold the libertarian principles of the party. I wouldn't really say that we separate ourselves or have our own, agenda. Aside from trying to grow the party within the county. We see a very diverse group. We have from Brooklyn Park in the north, which is much alike to Baltimore City, and then down south we have a very rural area spread out, lots of farms. So Anne Arundel County, from north to south is very diverse in its culture and its demographics. With a certain areas you might have the same people, so you can kind of push the same issues. But with us, we have all the issues to deal with for every group.
Give us one or two examples of those issues that you.
Well, so like in Brooklyn Park up north, being very close to the city, there's a large, most of the population is going to be poor African American communities. You can see the lack of infrastructure, the lack of money being put into the community that's falling apart. And then you have down south in the rural areas or along the bay, you're going to have more environmental issues with pollutants coming into the bays, the rivers. Obviously, the bay itself is a big cash crop for Anne Arundel County, all the different waterways that go into it. And then we have Annapolis. So we actually have, the capital was within our county. All the suburbs that are in between, we've got Fort Meade and the NSA, the NSA, I was about to say TSA. So, and the NSA. So we have a lot of military coming in and out. So everybody comes with their own baggage, their own issues, their own problems that need to be addressed. And hopefully, the Libertarian Party has an answer for all these different questions and queries.
Okay. Right. Jonathan, would you like the same question there?
Yeah. Well, there's a diversity of issues facing the city as well. the city is majority African American. There is, people talk about the white L, so the sort of the northwest of the city kind of going down, and then across the south of the city is kind of mostly white, and then the rest are mostly black. And there's a lot of diversity in terms of wealth and social background as well. So there's there is this diversity of issues that we have to confront as libertarians. When it comes to the poor communities, the issues that we have to think about most are the drug war, war on prostitution, war on, all those government interventions that particularly target poor communities. But you also have to think about the better off neighborhoods, because that's the tax base, and they are leaving because of high taxes and regulations and lack of infrastructure that's been caused by the 50 years of Democrat rule. And so it's a mix in a similar way to Arundel, with a slightly different balance.
Now, are you fortunate enough to have as many members as David's group there?
No, so far we've been having in January we had 8.
Okay.
And in February we had 6. But that's better than 0, which is what it was when I started leading this group back in the summer. There was nothing. Okay. And so I started it, and I've gotten some regulars, and we just need to keep building it up, keep spreading the word, and bringing more people in.
So you kind of single-handedly have taken this upon yourself to
yes.
start building, okay?
Yeah.
Now, what was it that motivated you to single-handedly want to do that?
Well, I felt I had to do something, and I started off by I was under the impression that there was an existing group, and I reached out and didn't get any response. And it turned out that the person who had been leading it had just fallen off the face of the internet anyway. So,
okay.
And so I was Bob Johnston, who is the chairman of the Maryland Libertarian Party, said, "Would you like to take over?" And I said, "Okay, I'll do it." Yeah, that's basically how it happened. I felt that no one else is going to take this on. Somebody has to do it. So it was up to me.
So would you say you felt a pretty deep sense of civic duty that led you to want to become involved in that way?
That's right, yes. Okay. I think it's very important to spread these ideas and to make people understand what's causing all these social problems that are facing the city.
Which you kind of led me into the next question I was going to ask, which is very nice. Appreciate that. But what are the goals that you have for this group?
I guess the long-term goals are to get libertarians in office and reduce government, create more freedom for people. In order to get that, we have to get more people to vote for us. In order to do that, we have to get people to know that we exist.
Yes.
And to at least agree with us on some issues, to see that we are ready to fight for them on the issues that they care about, that also agree with our principles. I know that there are about 1,600 registered libertarians in the city, which is a very tiny fraction of all the registered voters. But there were about 6,000 or so who voted for the last libertarian candidate for city council president in 2016, Susan Gastiñaga. She got about 6,000 votes. So there's at least about 5,000 other votes of people who are seriously considering a libertarian option. So it would be nice to get more of those people to register as libertarians and to join the party and volunteer and turn up to meetings and all that.
All right. And Jonathan, for your group I'm sorry, David, forgive me for that, my bad. David, for your group there in Run a Candle?
Oh, take over the world. Obviously, we have similar, trying to get libertarian candidates elected. I would say, as far as my personal goals,
you can list both if you like.
Yeah, well, having tried to change the Republican Party from the inside for a few years, I've seen, and now being, you know, on the other side and being in the Libertarian Party, and then having a network with people from multiple groups. Obviously, we want to get Libertarian Party candidates elected, but that's because of the principles that they have. And so finding individuals who may be Democrat or Republican and still want to push those values of individual sovereignty and free markets, I mean, hey, go for it, you know. Unfortunately, you know, being a representative of the Libertarian Party, we can't endorse other candidates, but I can, you know, behind the closed scene, good job, dude, you know.
Now, was that a written rule somewhere?
Oh yeah, well, I mean, any Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, Green Party, you know, if you're going to be endorsing a candidate outside of your party, yeah, you're gonna get, you know, either booted or severely,
right,
you know, spanked with the wet noodle, so to speak.
Well, and I want just to put it in, you know, for the folks in the audience here, you run across that a lot. I've ran across that in my campaign. Which how do we overcome that? Do you think? Now that you brought it up, that's a good segue. Yeah, the mentality of you can't go without outside your own party.
Well, I mean, that's clearly the biggest issue that the Libertarian Party has right now is you have so many Republicans and Democrats who aren't willing to vote outside of their political party. So who are we to say, oh, well, you're not in the Libertarian Party, so I can't support you? Well, I mean, but we would end up being guilty of the same thing that we accuse Republicans and Democrats of by, oh, well, you know, I can only vote down my list. So trying to explain to individuals that they should be voting for the best candidate based on their reputation or their voting record or, you know, the issues that they're actually running on instead of just the letter that's in front of their name, I think that's the big step for me. Yeah, I would love to say that I'm not interested at all in you know, the letter next to their name, but of course, you know, trying to push the Libertarian Party itself, you know, that is an issue. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And just for you folks out there, I'm sure neither Jonathan or David, you can be a Republican or Democrat and come to any of the meetings and join without actually even if you changing your party affiliation, should that be, but if you support any of the causes or thoughts or have the same mind of it, I'm sure they would welcome, you're very welcome to come out to the meetings and be part and take part of any of the libertarian causes. You kind of covered a little bit. I was going to ask you guys, gentlemen, what are the biggest challenges you face in trying to accomplish these goals? Or in general anyway, if you'd like to talk about.
Right. I think we need more diverse membership, both socially, racially, ethnically, and also geographically. Currently, because I'm based in the northwest of Baltimore, I sort of started to attract people from around there, and just need to do more reaching out in the rest of the city, and also bringing people from different neighborhoods, from different backgrounds, to show that we do represent everybody. Everybody has a stake in liberty and in freedom. And also to bring back what you were saying about not focusing on party affiliation. I did say it would be nice to increase the number of registered libertarians.
Oh, absolutely.
But when we're this small and when we care about freedom and bringing freedom to people and to the community, we can't afford to stick to labels like that. So a goal is to reach out to as many other people as possible in which that we have common ground with. And the challenge is just to let them know that we exist. I've already been reaching out a lot on social media. That's that's pretty easy for me, but it's also reaching out in person, of course, and going to different neighborhoods and letting people know about us.
So one of the main challenges I'm kind of hearing that you're facing is you need people to help get out into these neighborhoods. Yes. Okay, so 6 strong, hopefully it'll turn into 12 strong, and on and on and on. And David, same kind of goes for your area as well, or is there different challenges you face in that area?
8 years in politics shows you a lot. especially in the liberty movement.
And you still want to stay involved?
Yeah, it's I guess a little sadomasochist to be involved in politics, and you take your lickings and you keep on moving. One thing I've noticed, like, so I'm sure this is the same in the Republican well, I know in the Republican Party because I spent time there. People argue, well, what's a real Republican, or I'm a social conservative, or I'm a moderate, or there were those of us who supported Ron Paul who were the Liberty Republicans or Libertarian Republicans, and it was interesting to be constantly told like well, Libertarians belong in the Libertarian Party. So eventually after 4 years, it's like, okay, fine. All right, well, bye. Like I'll just go and join the Libertarian Party, I guess. Where I belong. Well, I guess I should have always been. But in the liberty movement, we almost have that tenfold. I saw a meme. It was talking about how libertarians and Republicans are the enemies, and then libertarians and Democrats, libertarians and this, that, and libertarians and libertarians. We ruin libertarianism by arguing constantly, on social media about what a real libertarian is, or you have a minute difference in one political policy. You could agree on 99% of everything, and on one issue, you don't agree on that issue 100%, and like, oh, well, you're not a real libertarian. It's extremely frustrating. It's like, we spent 4 hours having this argument, but we could have been, knocking on how many doors. Explain to complete strangers, about our philosophy, and they've never even heard of us before. And I can't even tell you how many times I've said, "Oh, I'm a libertarian." They're like, well, "What's that?" It's like, "Oh, well, let me explain. Let me just break out the entire, philosophy." But if libertarians could spend less time worrying about what real libertarianism is, and start going out to people who have never heard the message before and just kind of giving a broad overreach, or saying, hey, this is what the party is about, this is what the liberty movement is about. We have great liberty movement individuals who are in the Republican Party, who are anarcho-capitalists, who don't even vote, but to argue about whether or not Rand is a real libertarian, Rand Paul, Republican, is a real libertarian or anarcho-capitalist, saying, well, if you vote, you're endorsing the system, and all that, it doesn't matter. What matters is trying to push the message of individual sovereignty and free markets to the community and say, hey, look, these philosophical views, if you look at throughout history, like we can see that government has been destructive, not only to individuals, but to just our species in general, and we can find a better way if we just work with each other. If we can just get that message out to 300 million Americans, or 300,000 Anne Arundel County residents, that's a much bigger task and a much more fulfilling task than deciding whether or not the Libertarian Party stands on one issue on this or that. So that's my biggest challenge. I've been so tired of having the what's a real libertarian conversation. That it's like, okay, if, like you said, if you're a Republican, you're a Democrat, you're independent, and you're just interested in the ideas, the philosophy behind libertarianism, you're more than welcome to come to our event. I mean, we've already been reaching out to Republican and Democrat county council members and saying, hey, come out to our meetings, meet my constituents. Let's engage in dialogue. Let's create a working relationship. Working with other organizations who are not necessarily liberty leaning, and just saying, hey, let's create a relationship where we see Trump and Pelosi had a joint press conference maybe a month or two back, and it's supposed to be this point where you have the head of the executive branch and you have one of the heads of the legislative branch coming together in a meeting just like we're at. And they're supposed to be telling the American people, like, hey, we're coming to this together. And within like 30 seconds, they're yelling at each other on national headline news, and it's just like, oh my God, like that's our government. So like, let's not have that. Let's have a intellectual debate. Let's have a conversation where we can treat each other like human beings and kind of get to the root of what's going on and figure out solutions without screaming at each other.
Well, what you just explained sounds kind of like a lot of what I see in the any of the libertarian chat rooms or Facebook ones. You'll see a question and it goes, how do libertarians think about this? Right. And it's to dispel any notions out there in TV land. There is no script for what a libertarian is supposed to think about A, B, C, D, or E. But you did mention the libertarian ideas. Name a couple, just in case there are some folks out there that don't know any at all. So give them one or two.
Yeah, well, individual sovereignty and free markets. I mean, that's we look at like what traditionally you think of when the Democrats and the Republican parties. You know, Republicans champion fiscal responsibility, or at least they used to. So we're of the same mind, where not fiscal conservatism, but responsibility or free markets. The idea that individuals can do what they want with their wealth in order to create additional wealth, and that the government, whenever it creates regulations, like that's going to cause the system to slow down. That's what causes poverty. And when we look at individual sovereignty, like we used to think of the Democrat Party as we call them socially liberal. We would rather use the term socially tolerant. And we used to see the Democrat Party champion free speech. We don't see that anymore. We see, oh, well, that's hate speech. Okay, well, define hate speech. Oh, well, it's this, that, and the other thing. We see the slow movement towards restricting anybody's ability to speak out about the government. It's now illegal in so many states to protest what Israel is doing to Palestine because it's considered anti-Jew. It's like, well, it has nothing to do with their religion. It has to do with the fact that millions of Palestinians are being displaced, but you can't say that now, and so where's the Democrat Party on that? Where's the ACLU on that? We don't see them anymore. So that's, we're a Libertarian Party. We're saying, no, you have, as an individual, you have sovereign rights, and among those rights are the ability to say whatever you want to say. I mean, obviously, there's repercussions. Aunt Joan isn't going to talk to you anymore, but to say that the government can say, well, we're going to throw you in a metal cage for however many months or years because you said the wrong thing. It's like, oh, I mean, that sounds like Tsarist Russia.
Yep.
Right.
All right. To move on to my next one, this is to give you the opportunity to tell the folks out there that are watching and will watch this is, what do you need? What is it that you need from the folks in your community to help you accomplish some of these goals that we speak of, or any of this that we're talking about?
Well, I would say if you know about libertarianism and if the message appeals to you, then please come to our meetings to introduce yourselves and just let us know. Let us know about you and where you come from and what issues matter most to you. If you don't agree with the whole program, but you agree with us on something, like if you agree with us that marijuana should be fully legalized, if you believe that sex work should be fully legalized, if you believe that taxes should be lower, if you agree with us on just one issue, also introduce yourselves, come to a meeting, let us know about the issues that you care about, and we'll let us know that we should be fighting for you, and we will fight for you.
So you don't have to, one out there doesn't have to, sign on and agree with every 50 tenets of the Libertarian platform. I don't think there's 50, but any issue that affects you personally, then you want those folks to come make those issues well known to you. Okay. And I hope at the end of the show we'll be able to put up your contact information and everything so people will know how to contact you. Or you can feel free to look in the camera and tell them if you like.
Sure. Well, we're on Baltimore City Libertarians, can be found on Facebook. Just search for Baltimore City Libertarians and it will turn up, and you can sign up for our mailing list at the top of the page, and you can also contact me by my email address, gressmeister@gmail.com.
Okay.
Yeah, likewise, Anne Arundel County Libertarians has our own Facebook page. There's also the Libertarian Party of Maryland has its website up. And we have monthly meetings on the second Monday of every month at Libations in Millersville. We would like to know what we can do to help you. There's too often people say, well, we need something. No, we want you to tell us what there's a cause that we can actually help you with.
And I just want to add that the Baltimore City Libertarian meetings is on the third Monday of every month at Mount Washington Tavern. That's in Northwest Baltimore.
In closing, I always try to throw out some kind of little saying. So this one I just thought of as they reminded me. A very famous American, a very famous Republican American said at one point that at the heart of conservatism is libertarianism. And one thing that David made me think of, these libertarian ideals aren't ones snatched out of thin air. You can find all their basis in that little document we call
U.S. Constitution.
There you go. He's got a very nice tie. That it's in fact, I need to find out where you got that from. I want one. I think you said your mom gave it to you, correct?
Yep.
And that, I guess, concludes our show for today. And thank you for joining us on In, Around, and Through Maryland Politics. I hope to see you next time.
You're watching Maryland Politics here on TV Free Baltimore.
This is my jump shot. Trash ball, beneath me. Everybody wins. Let me show you how to play. Well, when you pick up some trash, and it's a ball, and then you throw it in the bucket, you're playing a trash ball. A jump shot hook, you gotta put it away. We're gonna play that trash ball every day.
Come on, Baltimore, play ball and keep it clean.
This is Sam with Restore Computer Repair in Baltimore, Maryland. If you're having any computer problems whatsoever with your Mac or PC, desktop or laptop, we can fix it at a guaranteed lowest price. We're located at 8701 Harford Road in Parkville, Maryland, 21234. You can reach us at 443-725-5050. That's 443-725-5050. We're open Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 5:30 p.m., and Saturdays, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. You can reach us at www.restorecomputerrepair.com.
Hey guys, Johnny Alonzo, and you're watching TV Free Baltimore.
You're watching the Paul Stefan Show on TV Free Baltimore.
Hello, it's Paul Stefan, and tonight we're having a special edition of our program. We have with us in tonight a couple of Baltimore's best musicians in my mind. We have the story and song writer and alchemist, Ellen Cherry. And we also have the driving force behind June Star, Andrew Grimm. And they are here to start our show off with a song called The Locksmith.
I've been drinking coffee like a factory horse, pulling a heavy cart of words around, keeping my eyes north on that guiding star, dreaming in his bed while he plays and sings with me in his head. And I spent a whole night's sleep picking at the lock of this mystery. Forgive me, I've lost my key. I empty pockets and I'm searching every drawer. Stumbling through the neighborhood, I'm trying every door. Draw me a map to our old address. I wanna lay down on that dirty floor and confess, 'cause my heart can't lie to me. It says contrary to belief, the truth won't set you free. Should close the windows or drop the shades, then I can wish and hope and dream the world away. Strip the memories from the walls with turpentine. I'll deadbolt that open door swinging in my mind. 'Cause my whole night's sleep picking at the lock of this mystery. forgive me. Forgive me, I've lost my key.
Where do the ideas or the inspiration come from for your songs?
Wow. Well, you mentioned a book by Eric Larson called The Devil in the White City.
Right.
Historical events that come up, I was very interested in the idea of luck and how luck can be perceived as good or bad. And that led me to think about the Titanic, because that was a really lucky thing to be on that boat and a really unlucky thing that they hit an iceberg.
And the Violet swims and the ship goes down.
Right, you got it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So Violet Jessup survived that. She was a nursemaid on the deck of that ship, and I can't even, we sort of gloss over the fact that, you know, people are in complete panic. And she managed to help shepherd herself and others onto the boat in this, what we would consider now a heroic act, to save herself and these other women and children. But that really happened. People died. It wasn't just like, oh, the boat sank and then they were in the water and it was over. And it was a horrific, terrible experience. And I thought, that will make a perfect pop song. Like, I'm gonna put that into a sea shanty about death, exactly. And it's because I don't want to forget. So the inspiration for songs come from things that I think are interesting, or human experiences that I think are fascinating, and what they must be like to go through. One of my favorite songs I wrote in the last couple of years is called I Have No Place for My Sadness, and it's sort of a lilting, happy-sounding song about dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder, but thinking of your depression and your existential trauma as a thing that breaks loose. It breaks from its leash. It figures out the code and gets out of jail and runs away from you, and then you feel abandoned by it. And then in the next verse, it comes back like a dog that won't leave you alone. It keeps barking at the door and wants to be let in. And then in the third verse, it becomes something fluid and moving away from you. And the whole point of it is to reassure the listener that the singer understands that this disorder and depression is all of these things metaphorically and seemingly real. But ultimately, it's just part of the fact that this happens to every single one of us in some way in our lives. We're on a path, and something will veer us off that path onto something else, and that we have to learn to become accustomed to change and to deal with change. And to me, that was like a perfect way to, like, I wanted to be inspired by my own experience. So I think more of the songs I'm writing now are inspired by more of my own experience. Like I talked about, the next show will be a deeply hard thing to write, but also I think a good experience for me personally to get out there, and hopefully will help people who are dealing with similar issues to relate, you know, in an artistic way.
Because I think that was the song and the message, and it struck me because I wrote the lyric down. It was like, is it enough just to learn to let go?
Yeah.
And is it enough just to learn to let go?
I really appreciate, I want to be just thankful and fortunate. I feel really fortunate in this moment that you listened to the songs and the lyrics, because it means a lot to me that you did that. That's in a song called Sauk Bay.
That's the one with the winding path.
Yeah, right.
In the Indians in Mexico, yeah.
Mayans, exactly.
Mayans, yes.
No, you're exactly right.
The crushed stones that would be bright at night with the moon. And
yep.
That's in your story part.
Exactly. So the Sauk Bay is the Mayan word for white road, and they built these limestone roads, straight thoroughfares between cities. And for a person like me who wanders, it's very difficult to be, you get to your destination faster if we walk in the straight path, but it's a little bit more interesting, and we need people to wander off the path and explore new areas, because it's brave and scary and courageous, but we have to see what's outside of the path, because there is other ways to live your life. And that struck me looking at that road, or that concept, and thinking about it. And I just thought, if my life gets summed up at the end of it, is it enough of everything that I've achieved? I say that, of all that I've bought and I've owned, isn't enough just to have learned to let go. Because I'm constantly in the process of, like, it's a way to be free from everything, from material possessions and also from feeling too attached to the way other people feel. So it's a learning process for me.
Right, because one of the questions I was going to ask, but I'll put it back in here now because we're talking about your music, is that a lot of it seems to start, I know you had a thing, at least in college, and since probably for poetry.
Yeah.
So I always ask songwriters, what comes first for them, the lyrics or the music?
That's a good question for both of us to answer. I'll start first so you can think.
Okay.
If you want to.
Yeah,
because the
I'm not really sure what my process is.
I've observed his process. It's very good. His process is much more efficient than mine. Mine is this nebulous thing that I'm still trying to figure out even after 25 years of writing it. But typically, I will have a word or phrase. I'll write down the word or phrase and sing it like a melody, and something will get attached to it, and then I basically have built the house over and then have to put the accompaniment foundation underneath it, somehow figure out. I've put myself in so many corners that way because I've had to figure out complex chords on the piano that I did not know or understand simply because I refused to alter the melody. And I was like, well, this is the way the melody's going, so I've got to figure out the accompaniment later. There's only been 2 or 3 songs that I can identify over 20 plus years where I've actually said, I'm writing the chorus now, next is the verse. I already knew, like, everything was sort of structured and written out, so for me, I would say that it's words first, and words plus melody plus like 2 or 3 years of time equals song. I've been hanging on in the bottom of hell by the skin of these pretty white teeth and fingernails. Is that a cavern wall, the stairs to heaven, or a wishing well? If you were looking through these tired eyes, you could hardly tell. I heard a promise and I made one to myself. Oh well. I sang a long sad note with each step down, just in case you had the time to follow me around. I crossed the river past the dog onto hallowed ground, and when I turned the walls, it swallowed all my sound. So I begged the muse to stay, but I see she had flown. I should have known, I should have known, I should have known, I should have known. I made a choice to shut my mouth and send my hopes by first-class post to the underground. I poisoned roots, sowed the seeds of doubt. I stopped the rain. I sparked a fire that I thought I could keep aflame. And I crushed the bones of the lies I've told under my feet. I couldn't speak. Well, I said it once, there is no reason to repeat. I've been hanging on in the bottom of hell by the skin of these pretty white teeth and a fingernail. Well, I write it down, you eat it up, we get along. What we're thinking of. I write it down, you eat it up, we get along. We called it love. We called it love. We called it love.
was impressed, a lot of the songs I have heard that you've done, is the poetic sense that you get in phrasing in certain lyrics. Like I said, for example, I'll bring up, like, you know, it's Whippoorwill Lodge, which yeah, the video was nice of pictures of your actual family.
Yeah.
But to have in there, Mom washed the sun or the sunshine off of our skin. That's poetry right there.
Thank you so much.
And also,
I
you know,
agree.
You know, of course, the other one. You
I'm
know,
amazing.
Like, you know that of course you are. That we all are. And to say that, you know, the one where you say, you know, I hope to dream of you tonight. Mm-hmm. This whole idea, I have a window in my heart.
Yeah. I wear a window on my heart so you can see right through. Single pane of glass that separates the vows, the halves. It does not sever me from you. I put a seal upon my lips. That's a promise to be true. Reminder, residue, and it preserves clues and other cues. And that kiss I saved for you. It's a knot that won't untie, truth that doesn't lie. Tiny death we shared exactly the same time. It brought us back to life. I've got these calluses on my hands. Oh, you know the work I've done. An honest mark, you see, and it protects the very heart of me and all the battles I've won. Skin that will not break, solemn sleep that cannot wake, and incandescence that never loses the light. I hope to dream of you tonight. I hope to dream of you tonight. I wear a window on my heart so you can see right through. Single pane of glass, it separates the valves, the halves. It does not sever me from you. My name is Ellen Cherry. You can find me at ellencherry.com. And this is my friend Andrew Grimm, and you can find him at
Junestar.com. JUNESTAR.com.
And together we have a blog. Oh, no, it's not a blog.
It's a podcast.
It's a podcast.
It's a blogcast.
It's a podcast featuring the two of us.
We work out all the time.
Called Why Aren't You Famous? And that's at whyaren'tyoufamous.org. Check it out. We'll be on tour this fall.
Terrific.
You're watching The Paul Stefan Show on TV Free Baltimore.
Hello, I'm Steve Darnall, the publisher of Nostalgia Digest, and you're watching TV Free Baltimore. Well done.
The Despotille is on my shore, Maryland, my Maryland. His torch is at thy temple door, Maryland, my Maryland. Avenge the patriotic roar that fleck the streets of Baltimore, and be the battle queen of yore, Maryland, my Maryland. Thou wilt but cower in the dust, Maryland, my Maryland. Thy beaming sword shall never rust, Maryland, my Maryland. Remember Carroll's sacred trust, remember Howard's warlike trust, and always onwards with the just, Maryland, my Maryland.
This concludes another day of live stream broadcasting from TV Free Baltimore.